In this second module, we will discuss the Buddhist teachings on personal training. This means training the mind. So how does personal training relate to harmony? As discussed in the previous module, harmony in any community depends on the shared commitment to ethical conduct. Morality is the foundation for harmony. A shared commitment to ethical conduct gives everybody a sense of security or freedom from fear. If I feel that the people around me are not going to try to kill me, not steal from me, not lie to me, not commit adultery with my wife, then I can have a sense of security or freedom from fear that is the starting point or foundation for harmony. When the people around me and I put our commitment to ethical conduct into action, this is when harmony between myself and the people around me can develop. Putting commitments into action means personal training or training the mind. So what approach did the Buddha recommend for lay people to put their ethical conduct into action? There are these three sources of merit. Which three? The meritorious activity of giving, Donna, the meritorious activity of virtue, Sila, the meritorious activity of mental development, Bhavana. When talking to lay people, the Buddha used this structure. The Buddha started with the importance of giving, Dana. Once the layperson was well established in Dana, the Buddha then talked about the importance of virtue, Sila. Once a layperson had a strong foundation of Dana and Sila, the Buddha stressed the importance of mental development, Bhavana. The commentaries, which were compiled by monks after the time of the Buddha, took this list of 3 items, Dana, Sila, Bhavana, and expanded it into 10 bases of meritorious deeds. The Dana group includes generosity, transference of merit, and rejoicing in others' merit. The Sila group includes keeping precepts, reverence, and service. The Bhavana group includes meditation, teaching the Dhamma, listening to the Dhamma, and straightening of views. This sutta explains how practicing Dana and Sila can lead to a fortunate rebirth. Practicing Dana and Sila to a limited extent, but not practicing Bhavana, this may lead to rebirth as a human in an unfavorable condition. Practicing Dana and Sila to a medium extent, but not practicing Bhavana, this may lead to rebirth as a human in a favorable condition. Practicing Dana and Sila to a superior extent, but not practicing Bhavana, this may lead to rebirth as a Deva. After reading this sutta, you may wonder, what about practicing Bhavana? Actually, practicing Bhavana is the key to spiritual development. Practicing Dana and Sila generates a lot of good karma, but it does not lead directly to enlightenment. I will return to this topic later in the talk. Now let's look at a sutta that the Buddha gave to a layperson explaining the relative merits of different activities. Dana to a saint is far more meritorious than Dana to a non-saint. Dana to the Buddha is far more meritorious than Dana to a saint. Dana to the Sangha, the community of monks, is far more meritorious than Dana to the Buddha. Building a monastery is far more meritorious than Dana to the Sangha. This portion of the sutta talks about the merit associated with Dana. Notice that donating toward a monastery, helping to build a long-lasting structure, generates more merit than giving food or robes. This is one way of ranking merit associated with Dana. Another way is based on the volition of the donor. Giving with strong volition, giving with the heart, is more meritorious than giving with weak volition. The sutta continues. Taking the 3 refuges with your heart is far more meritorious than building a monastery. The 3 refuges are the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Taking the 5 precepts with your heart is far more meritorious than taking the 3 refuges. We will talk more about the 5 precepts a little later. This is the Sila portion of the sutta. Notice that Sila, when done with your heart, generates far more merit than Dana. Something that most Buddhists do not realize is that at the time of the Buddha, taking the 3 refuges and taking the 5 precepts was something that a layperson did once in their lifetimes. These days, taking the 3 refuges and 5 precepts has been turned into a ritual that is frequently repeated. I hope that when you take the 3 refuges and take the 5 precepts, that you do it with your heart and do not let the ritual aspect weaken your volition. The sutta continues with mental development, bhavana. Developing loving kindness or metta meditation for a short while is far more meritorious than taking the 5 precepts. Developing insight, vipassana meditation for an instant is far more meritorious than loving kindness meditation. I will return to this topic later in the talk. Here is a graphical representation of this sutta. Each time you move up 1 step, you generate a lot more merit. As you can see from this diagram, Dana is good. Sila, taking refuges and precepts, is better, and bhavana, metta and vipassana, is best. Just as the Buddha understood that not everybody was ready to renounce the home life and become a monastic, the Buddha also gave different instructions to lay people and to monastics. Similarly, not every lay person is ready to commit to a long meditation retreat, so the Buddha presented a graduated path for lay people, starting with Dana, then Sila, and finally Bhavana. Now let's look in a little bit more detail at Dana, Sila, and Bhavana, starting with Dana. As I have mentioned, Dana means giving. Let's look at some suttas in which the Buddha talked about Dana. If people knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of selfishness overcome their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared, if there were someone to receive their gift. But because beings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given. The stain of selfishness overcomes their minds. In this sutta, the Buddha talked about the importance of dana. There are these 8 grounds for giving: motivated by desire, motivated by hatred, motivated by delusion, from fear of criticism, thinking, giving was practiced by my forefathers. I should not abandon this ancient family custom. Now, when the Buddha gives a list, it's often presented in order with the best option at the end. So the list continues. Thinking, having given this gift, after death I will be reborn in a good destination. Thinking, when I am giving this gift, my mind becomes calm and joyful. And finally, the best option is for the purpose of spiritual development. So hoping for calmness and spiritual joy is better than hoping to get a good rebirth. And the best motivation for dana is to undertake spiritual development. So in summary, the benefit from dana depends on the attitude of the donor. Giving dana with the hope that you'll get some kind of reward is less beneficial than giving dana to undertake spiritual development. This sutta lists 5 ways of giving. A person of integrity gives gifts in 5 ways: with a sense of conviction, attentively, in season, with an empathetic heart, without adversely affecting himself or others. In this sutta, the Buddha talked about the benefits of dana to the donor. A female layperson who gives food enjoys 4 things in the future as a human or a deva. Having given life, she enjoys life. Having given beauty, she enjoys beauty. Having given happiness, she enjoys happiness. Having given strength, she enjoys strength. This sutta was addressed to Supavasa, who the Buddha identified as the foremost among female lay followers in giving what was excellent. I'm sure that the same benefits accrue to male donors as well. There are these 2 kinds of gifts, offerings, and generosity: the gift, offering, and generosity of material goods, and the gift, offering, and generosity of the Dhamma. Of these 2 types of gift, offering, and generosity, the gift, offering, generosity of the Dhamma is foremost. This is summarized in a famous verse from the Dhammapada. The gift of Dhamma excels all gifts. The taste of the Dhamma excels all tastes. The delight in the Dhamma excels all delights. All right, let's move on to Sila. As mentioned earlier, Sila means virtue. What is bad? Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slander, harsh speech, idle talk, covetousness, ill will, and wrong view are bad. This sutta was discussed in the previous module. These 10 items should all be avoided as they are bad. In this module, we will focus on the 5 precepts. For lay people, the 5 precepts are the foundation of Sila. As you're probably aware, the 5 precepts are: I undertake a rule of training to avoid killing. I undertake a rule of training to avoid stealing. I undertake a rule of training to avoid sexual misconduct. I undertake a rule of training to avoid lying. I undertake a rule of training to avoid intoxicants. So let's consider them as a group. From the wording of the precepts, it's clear that these precepts are self-imposed. We undertake them because we know that they are the right things to do. From the wording of the precepts, it is clear that the focus of the precepts is on training the mind. Training means self-improvement, a lifelong process. It is beneficial to repeat the precepts regularly. This repeated reinforcement strengthens the training. From the wording of the precepts, it is clear that the precepts focus on morality, avoiding bad things. A beautiful summary of the Buddha's teachings is from the Dhammapada. Avoid evil, do good, purify the mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. These 3, avoid evil, do good, purify the mind, are like the 3 legs of a tripod. Each leg supports the other 2 legs. Working together, These three legs can support your spiritual development. The 5 precepts are the foundation of avoid evil. Now, let's look at do good. These wholesome practices should be done because they are the right things to do. Avoid killing means actively practicing kindness and compassion. Avoid stealing means actively practicing generosity and contentment. Avoid sexual misconduct means actively practicing faithfulness. Avoid lying means actively practicing honesty and integrity. And avoid intoxicants means actively practicing wise attention. Wise attention means looking at things through the lens of the Buddhist teachings, not being deluded and not seeing things in a wrong way. So here is a summary of the 5 precepts, which are avoid evil and the corresponding do good qualities. Actively practicing wise attention is an aspect of purifying the mind. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail by referring to a set of instructions given by the Buddha to his 7-year-old son, Rahula. The Buddha asked his son, "What do you think, Rahula? What is a mirror for?" His son answered, "For reflection, sir." The Buddha then advised, "In the same way, Rahula, everything you do should be done with repeated reflection." Repeated reflection means actively practicing wise attention. Whenever you want to do something, you should reflect on it. This thing that I want to do, would it lead to self-harm, to the harm of others, or to both? Would it be a bad thing with bad consequences? Wise attention should be applied before doing anything. This applies to actions, speech, and thoughts. If, on reflection, you know that it would lead to self-harm, to the harm of others, or to both, it would be a bad thing with bad consequences, then it is absolutely unfit for you to do this. So use wise attention to stop yourself from doing, saying, or thinking bad things. But if on reflection you know that it would not lead to self-harm, not lead to the harm of others or to both, it would be a good thing with good consequences, then it is fit for you to do this. Use wise attention to proceed to do, say, and think good things. While you are doing something, you should reflect. This thing that I am doing, is it leading to self-harm, to the harm of others, or to both? Is it a bad thing with bad consequences? If, on reflection, you know that it is leading to self-harm, to the harm of others, or to both, you should give it up. But if on reflection you know that it is not, you may continue with it. Use wise attention while doing, saying, or thinking things. Having done something, you should reflect. This thing that I have done, did it lead to self-harm, to the harm of others, or to both? Was it a bad thing with bad consequences? If, on reflection, you know that it led to self-harm, then you should confess it to the teacher or to another monk. Having confessed it, you should exercise restraint in the future. So use wise attention after doing, saying, or thinking things. If you realize that you have done, said, or thought something wrong, apologize and make a commitment to exercise restraint in the future. But if on reflection you know that it did not lead to self-harm, then you should stay mentally refreshed and joyful, training day and night in skillful mental qualities. If wise attention after the fact tells you that it was a good thing, then be joyful. So in summary, we should always be practicing wise attention by reflecting, what do I plan to do? What am I doing? And what did I do? Okay, we have discussed Donna, or generosity, and Sila, or virtue. As mentioned earlier, once a layperson had a strong foundation of Donna and Sila, the Buddha stressed the importance of mental development, bhavana. As mentioned earlier, actively practicing wise attention is part of purifying the mind, which is mental development. The Buddha's instructions to his son Rahula are one example of actively practicing wise attention. Let's look at another sutta in which the Buddha recounted his own experience before enlightenment. Before I became enlightened, I decided to divide my thoughts into 2 types. Good thoughts that are good for me and good for others, and bad thoughts that are bad for me and bad for others. I saw that whatever one pursues with thinking and pondering, that becomes the tendency of the mind. Now that last sentence, I saw that whatever one pursues with thinking and pondering, that becomes the tendency of the mind, is a description of accumulations, habits, tendencies, and affinities. When bad thoughts arose, I mindfully reflected. This is bad for me and bad for others. The bad thoughts subsided. I simply abandoned them. When good thoughts arose, I mindfully reflected. This is good for me and good for others. I should continue this for a long time. So I steadied, settled, unified, and composed the mind so that it would not be disturbed. This is simple, practical advice from the Buddha about how to deal with good and bad thoughts by actively practicing wise attention. But actively practicing wise attention is only one aspect of mental development. Do you remember this diagram that was presented earlier? The highest two steps, metta and vipassana, are part of mental development. Metta is an example of a tranquility meditation practice that steadies, settles, unifies, and composes the mind so that it is not disturbed. Vipassana is insight meditation that leads to the experience of enlightenment. Let's take a closer look at the role of mental development. As we know, our thoughts precede, guide, and control our speech and action. As it says in the first verse of the Dhammapada, mind precedes all speech and action. Mind is their chief. They're all mind-made. If a person speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of an ox. The Dhammapada continues in the second verse. Mind precedes all speech and action. Mind is their chief. They're all mind-made. If a person speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows him like a shadow. So our thoughts precede, guide, and control our speech and action. But what is it that precedes, guides, and controls our thoughts? This is where our latent tendencies or habits come into play. Our latent tendencies have a significant impact on our mental activities. The mind reacts to triggers based on our latent tendencies. Our latent tendencies can also be described as our habits, our accumulations, or even our affinities. Our tendencies, habits, accumulations, and affinities are working behind the scenes to direct our thoughts. So there's actually 3 levels of personal training of the mind. First, personal training at the level of speech and action. Second, personal training at the level of thoughts. And third, personal training at the level of latent tendencies. The first level of personal training of the mind works at the stage of speech or action. This is where Sila comes in. Because of Sila, we avoid saying or doing bad things when the opportunity arises, and we say or do good things when the opportunity arises. We've already discussed Sila. The second level of personal training of the mind works at the level of thoughts. Samadhi, or tranquility meditation, works to train the mind to be steady, settled, unified, and composed. Bad thoughts will not arise in a mind while it is naturally steadied, settled, unified, and composed. Metta, or loving kindness, is a form of tranquility meditation that was praised by the Buddha in many suttas. There are 11 benefits of loving kindness meditation. He sleeps in comfort. He awakes in comfort. He sees no evil dreams. He is dear to human beings. He is dear to non-human beings. Devas protect him. Fire, poison, and sword cannot touch him. His mind can concentrate quickly. His countenance is serene. He dies without being confused in mind. If he fails to attain enlightenment, he will be reborn in the Brahma world. We will talk more about loving kindness later. Here is something that I recently read in a book that really made sense to me. When the Dalai Lama greets you, you feel like you're the most important person in the world because his attention is undivided. He has said that one of his great practices of loving kindness is trying to treat whoever he meets as an old friend. Very inspiring. While we're on the topic of undivided attention, this problem of not being with the person that you are with happens at wedding dinners, family dinners, and in living rooms every day. This problem with handphones damages social harmony. All right, let's now return to personal training of the mind. The third level of personal training of the mind works at the level of latent tendencies. Insight or vipassana meditation can uproot latent tendencies so that they can never arise again. For example, when one achieves the first degree of sainthood, the latent tendency of skeptical doubt is uprooted and can never arise again. Other latent tendencies are uprooted at higher degrees of sainthood until all latent tendencies have been uprooted. Here is the same information presented in a slightly different way. On the surface are speech and action. This is what shows to other people. To work on our speech and action, we use the first level of personal training, which is virtue and precepts, Sila. Just underneath the surface, behind the speech and action, are our thoughts. Other people cannot see our thoughts, but they show through our speech and action. To work on our thoughts, we use the second level of personal training, which is developing a mental habit of steadying, settling, unifying, and composing the mind. This can be done using a tranquility meditation such as metta. At the deepest core are our latent tendencies. Our latent tendencies direct our thoughts. People who spend some time with us can recognize patterns in our thoughts and make conclusions about our latent tendencies, such as, she's a kind-hearted person, or he gets angry easily. To work on our latent tendencies, we use the third level of personal training, which is insight or vipassana. Insight or vipassana involves observing how the mind works using mindfulness. When the spotlight of mindfulness shines on bad latent tendencies, the bad latent tendencies tend to shrink in power. In conclusion, the practice of Donna and the practice of Sila leads to happiness to be experienced in this present life and to a fortunate rebirth. But practicing Donna, Sila, and Bhavana together can lead to enlightenment. When the people around me and I put our commitment to ethical conduct into action, this is when harmony between myself and the people around me can develop. Putting commitments into action means personal training or training the mind. For lay people, personal training involves Dana, generosity, Sila, virtue, and Bhavana, mental development. Many people believe that if they make a strong commitment, that radical change in behavior will follow. This usually doesn't work. Consider your success rate with your New Year's resolutions. Here are some common sense tips about what usually works when trying to drive personal change. Remember that our habits are part of our daily routines. Gradual reduction can work better than sudden stopping. Reward yourself when you succeed and don't be discouraged by setbacks. Work with a friend or a like-minded person. Share what works and what doesn't. Reflect that in making difficult changes, we are developing the virtue of persistent effort, an important life skill. A daily review of events, including reflection based on relevant suttas and considering more skillful approaches. Regular reflection on one's good actions and qualities related to social situations lead to their growth. Set aside quality time for evaluation and reflection. Now is the time for questions and answers.